Hello RWBY fans, and welcome to a RWBY episode analysis video. I am your host, Counselor763, and today we're going to take a look at the RWBY Volume 5 video to see what the writers have done thus far, as well as take a look at the story and make some predictions as to what might happen next. So without further ado, let's get into it. The episode begins with Crow giving us an intro that has a very detective noir feel to it, just before he is interrupted by Nora Valkyrie. The group makes some light callbacks to many of the challenges that they faced along their journey, including the fact that both Crow and Lai Ren nearly died at the hands of some of their more challenging foes. From there, we are introduced to the city of Mistral, as Crow gives us a light description of the city overall. From here, Crow gives us a brief description, instructing the team that the further down into Mistral you go, the more dangerous it becomes, just as the further up you go in Mistral, the safer it becomes. The next scene opens up with Schnee as she is heading towards Mistral. From the exchange that she has with the pilot, I'm sure we can all agree that her character has greatly improved since she first appeared in Volume 1. She has not only grown in her skill, but also in her personality, turning her into a character that has many of us, myself included, rooting for her as the story progresses. The best example can be seen when the pilot receives a distress signal from a fellow airship as it calls out for help. The look of concern on Schnee's face when she hears of them being in turmoil is enough to show us that she has come to care for people even though she knows nothing about them, a trait which is paramount for her to have as a huntress. Unfortunately, the pilot ignores the distress signal, stating that because it's his ship, it's his rules, and instead does everything he can to avoid the disaster that is going on. We are then given an overview of Haven Academy, with some of the group making mention of the fact that there is no one around. Crow obviously realizes that something is wrong and immediately rushes to Lionheart's office. It is there that a hilarious exchange is made as both men scare the crap out of each other before beginning to fill each other in on the events that have unfolded. The first thing that we learn is that the events of the Vital Festival had greater effects on the world of Remnant and not just Beacon itself. With all of its events being televised as Penny was torn to shreds by Pyrrha and the Grimm began to overrun the city, the people of the neighboring kingdoms began to feel great amounts of fear themselves, causing many more grim attacks to rise. This, of course, led to the deaths of many great huntsmen, some of which had worked at Haven Academy. Later on, we learned that each of the maidens is tied to one of the 4 relics, with each of the relics hidden behind a door that only the maidens themselves can access. It becomes more and more apparent as to why the maidens are pivotal to Salem's overall plan. On top of this, we gain some insight into the backstory of the Spring Maiden, who we learned in Volume 4 is with Raven and her tribe. We came to learn that she became a maiden at a young age, at which point she threw herself into her work. However, over time, the responsibilities of a maiden began to wear on her, until finally she ran away. She had been missing for 10 years, until Crow made mention to Lionheart that he knew where she was, and then proceeded to show him on a map that he had brought with him. If you pay attention in this scene, though, when Lionheart goes to press on the keyboard down at the bottom, you'll notice that he's actually copying the map, no doubt to give it to Watts. Not long after, we find Crow at a bar as we are treated to another exposition of the after-credits scene from Volume 4. I found this to be very entertaining, as Team RWBY is now implementing events from previous volumes into the next volume itself. Honestly, I hope we get to see more of this as we go into more volumes of RWBY. Backtracking a little, we return to Menagerie to find both Gira Belladonna and Sun Wukong storming into the house, mad about an earlier exchange. We learn the details of the exchange during a conversation between both Blake and Ilya. From what they discussed, we can be sure that the next few chapters will revolve around some very harrowing events that are about to take place on Menagerie, some of which may threaten the lives of the Belladonnas themselves. Moving right along, we cut to Yang, who has stopped at a gas station called Just Right. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, The title of this gas station, as well as the conversation she has with the bandit inside, are all allusions to the fact that Yang Xiaolong is in fact a personification of Goldilocks. This also gives us an answer to a question many of us have been asking since the ending of Volume 4, in which we wondered if Yang was headed off to study her sister, or in fact if she was going to go hunt down her mother. As we can obviously see, she in fact decided to go after her mother. Another key detail is that of her shaking arm, a slight allusion to the fact that Yang is still being affected by her PTSD from her fight with Adam Taurus. This is a really great and subtle detail that I hope we get to see more of in the coming volume. It may help to add more depth to her character as she overcomes the fact that beneath her strength, she is in fact suffering from a much deeper wound. Finally, we cut to Team Ranger staying at the house when they are introduced to Oscar/Ozpin. I really love the exchange here between Ruby and her uncle when she actually says, "You're drunk again?" The fact that she says this tells me this isn't the first time she's seen Crow drunk off his ass, and I'm fairly certain she has some very interesting stories revolving Drunkle Crow. The episode, of course, ends with Oscar revealing to everyone that he's in fact Ozpin, and Crow, crying out in joy, falling off the couch and onto his ass. Overall, I found this to be a very entertaining episode and a great introduction into the new volume of RWBY. I'm very interested to see the character development that arises from the subsequent episodes, especially with Yang and Blake. I'd also like to see how Team Ranger reacts to the fact that they're just now learning that Oscar is Ozpin. Personally, I could see some apprehension from them in coming to terms with this fact, but we'll just have to see what Miles and Carrie have in store for us. As always, thanks again for tuning in to this first RWBY episode analysis that I have created. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all next week.